Good evening, welcome. We're going to take about 45 minutes of your time this evening because we are here to get you ready for your interviews. Um, Quick introductions as I see the numbers climb and continue to climb. My name is Stuart Breyer. I'm one of the trustees of the 10,000 Black Interns Foundation. So helped set up the first program and very committed to seeing this be a success. And all of you who are joining tonight obviously care because you want to get that edge for your upcoming interviews, which is fantastic. So enough from me. I'm going to turn it over to David, who is going to run a session on core communication and video and virtual best practice. Please keep the chat going. It's fantastic. Please put questions in the Q&A, and David's going to try to make this interactive, so he'll tell you exactly how that's going to happen. David, thank you so much for joining us. Over to you.
Stu, always a pleasure to connect with you and be on this platform. Good evening, everyone. Great to be here again. Hopefully you're not getting too sick of me at this point. I've been on a number of sessions, but I think they've been of value and contribution. And today, as we move forward in the conversation, we've talked about a lot of things. We've talked about mindset. We've talked about different dynamics around preparation. We've talked about even some of the core communication elements of how do we position our messaging. And we're going to do a little bit more of that as we move forward in other sessions. This particular session, we're going to talk about a couple of things. How do we communicate? Like, what are the elements and characteristics of good communication? And then how do we do that over video and virtual? So I'm going to give you some of the best practices that we can think about as we are communicating over video, because a lot of the interviews and dynamics go that way, whether it's pre-recorded or it's over a medium like Zoom and otherwise. So Stu, great to have you here. Are you going to be sticking around? What's the plan? How do we want to navigate some of this? Because I can bring up my presentation, jump in. I'd also love to get folks engaged and brought up to the main screen as we move along as well.
I think that's a great idea, David. Why don't you go ahead and share your screen, and I'll be here, and you can pull me in and I'll jump in as needed.
Amazing. I just see in from Trinidad and Tobago. I like it. We've got a lot of folks coming in from all different angles and directions and areas. And there we go. Just to check, Stu, are you seeing my slides?
Perfect. Yes.
Amazing, everyone. So, and just to echo what Stu said earlier, we want this to be highly interactive. As you've seen in the past, I've brought some folks up for conversation, and I'd love to keep that going. So if you would like to participate, raise your hand. I'm also going to do a lot of Q&A at the end, because I don't want this to be, as I've said in the past, just back and forth, me just showing information to you. I want to answer the questions that are most important and that are most pressing for all of you as well. So as we go along, feel free to put in the chat. Also, feel free to raise your hand, because Stu will be bringing folks up to have a live conversation with me as we move along. So let's think about this. What are we talking about today? Over the next 45 minutes to an hour, we're going to talk about the core components of communication and also optimizing virtual and video communication. All of these components are critical to how we communicate. So it's not always the message that we're delivering, it's how we are delivering the message that often matters the most and is highly impactful to the impression that we make on the people that we are communicating and connecting with. So with that, let's look at these dynamics. When we think about the components of impactful communication, now this is going to be open to everyone. What are some of the things that you think are important when we communicate? I'm going to highlight 4 specific ones, but as you're listening to this, to make this conversational and interactive, Stu, if you want to bring some folks up, and also folks, if you want to put into the chat, what are some of the components of communication? How am I communicating with you right now? What are some of the elements I'm using? What are some of the critical factors that if we do them well, communication lands a lot more powerfully? If we don't do them well, communication gets broken. And when we're trying to build trust with people, it's important that we're communicating at a certain level that isn't effective. So I see Fayo. Fayo, you are one of my favorite guests. Are you out there today? I see you up in the main stage. How are you doing today, Fayo?
I'm good today. How are you?
It's like we're developing this this great friendship online. We've never actually met, but you've been have you been to every session just to check in? I think you have.
Yeah, I have.
Amazing. And Stu shared previously when he was introducing on a previous segment, and this is for everyone, the more you join in on this, the more you actually implement these tricks, tips, strategies, approaches, the more impactful it will be. Stu, I don't know if you wanted to share on that because you've shared it in the past, maybe to give a little color from last year, what actually the outcomes were.
Sure, David. It's incredible to see so many of you here. And I remember after the first session that we ran with David, we were doing a debrief call because it's all about incremental improvements, right? What can we do better? How can we get better? How can we do a better presentation? And I said to him, I'm looking at 500 probable successful interns. These are the ones who are going to make it. These are the ones who care. These are the ones who are going to get hired. And the work, the grit, showing up, it makes a difference as we get to know you. And I remember from the 2021 program of looking through the list of everybody who attended the sessions, and then that looking at the list of everybody got hired, and there was huge overlap. So you're making a great investment in your time. And my firm is looking for interns, so hopefully I will see some of you in person or digitally.
That's right. And we talked about a lot of the different dynamics of not only attending these sessions, but connecting with folks inside the community, connecting with myself. I ended up developing a lot of great relationships with people who were in the program, outside the program, but this is also a great community for you to meet one another too. So I just want to highlight and enforce and share a little bit more about that. But Fayo, let's go back to the session here. We're thinking about how we communicate. I'm communicating with you, you're communicating with me. What are some of the basic components of communication as you're thinking about it?
I would say body language is important, making eye contact and making sure you're speaking clearly and not like waffling around, just getting straight to the point and speaking clearly and just using terms that makes it easy for people to understand as well. And also listening. It's also besides when you're communicating, it's not only for you to be speaking, it's also for you to listen as well.
So I was laughing a little bit and smiling as you were saying that, Fayo, because you literally hit on every single one of the four that I'm about to share with people. So hope everybody was listening to what Fayo said, because she clearly knows some of this stuff, but I'm going to share it with you, and then we're going to go into a little bit more detail. So the first thing is pace. Like, how fast are we speaking? What are the different ways and tonalities and energies that we're bringing as we're moving and communicating in a conversation? Next up, which actually Fayo talked about, was language, the messages, the words that we use, the word choices that we make. And we're going to dig into that in a little bit more detail in just a moment. And then eye contact. Eye contact is critical. Am I making eye contact with you, with the camera? And we're going to talk about some of the best practices around that as well. And then the last but not least is body language. How are we not only just speaking, but what is our body saying? Are we using our hands? Should we be using our hands? Where are we in the camera? Where are we positioned inside of the conversation so that people are getting the best message possible? Fayo, quick question. What percentage of communication do you think is words? And what percentage of communication do you think is something other than words?
I would say maybe like 40% are words and then 60% are nonverbal.
Interesting. In the chat, everyone, what stats do you think? What percentage is actual words? And then what percentage is all the other stuff that we could possibly be doing in a conversation? I don't think anyone's got it. It's actually, and there's a whole combination of factors here, but it is 7% the words we actually use. The rest is body language, the vocal quality, the volume, the speed, all of these different dynamics. If we look at human communication, words and language is actually a small portion of it. And the rest is all the other things that we're doing, the energy that we bring, the words, not that we're using, but the way we're delivering those words. Are we speaking fast? Are we speaking slow? Do we have an accent? Am I using body language? All of those things are actually crucial for whether or not communication lands with our audience. Is that surprising a little bit, Fayo, or how do you feel about that percentage?
I would have thought maybe the verbal was just a little bit higher. I didn't think it'd be as low as 7%.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about. But think about, and if you're watching right now, you just saw Fio smile. Like that indicated something. There were no words exchanged, but the impression you get from someone who's enjoying themselves, someone who's smiling, someone who's exuding that energy without any words is critical and crucial to how we impact other people. If we come in, we might not be speaking, I'm nervous, but we might be doing things that the tone of our voice might be cracked, and that might indicate that we're nervous. But when somebody feels like we're nervous, the communication is less powerful. So we want to think about all those things. Fio, thank you for always showing up, always participating and coming forward. Always appreciate you partaking and joining in on the conversation.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Always. Let's talk here about pace. So with pace, I want to go through a few things. And Adijat, are you there? Are you available to come forward and chat for a little bit?
Yes, I'm here. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening. How are you doing today?
I'm fine, thank you.
So I wanted to go through, I'll go through a few of these. As I do, I may pause and ask you some questions. I actually want to go on to the next slide and ask you a question about it, and we'll do that in just a moment. So for everyone, pace. When we think about pace, pace can be a lot of things, but I broke it down into a few core elements. The rate of words that we speak. We all speak lots of words. The average human, I think, speaks 100 to 200 words per minute, or could if you want. If you're talking to someone who speaks a little faster, it might be up at 500. The reality is, though, it's not usually that we have a problem understanding the words unless there is a language challenge or otherwise. It's usually that they're speaking so many ideas and throwing so many ideas at us so fast that our mind can't keep up. And when that happens, communication is broken. So you want to think about not necessarily the amount of words you're using, but the speed at which you're throwing ideas at people. And we're going to talk about how to do that in a way that lands more powerfully in just a minute. Energy and enthusiasm is also grouped into pace here. So it's, do you have a smile on your face? Are you bringing a certain level of energy? Are you excited to be in the conversation? And can the listener feel that from you? That's all grouped into, it might not logically seem like pace, but when we think about it for today, that's one thing you want to think about. How is my pace? How is my energy? How is my enthusiasm? How is it coming through the screen or coming through to my audience? And then the last one is the power of the pause. I'm going to actually highlight this in just a moment, but Adija, I'm going to ask you as I go on to the next slide. Have you ever been in a conversation, and maybe this is one right now because I'm speaking pretty fast and maybe I'm saying a lot, but have you ever been in a conversation with somebody where they don't stop for a breath? They just start talking and saying, oh, my day was great. I did this, I did this, I did this. I went to the park. I then went to the museum. I then had dinner with my family. I then did that. Have you ever been in a conversation like that, Adijat, where at some point you were just like, I can't keep up with all that you're saying and I need to check out of this conversation?
Yes.
How often would you say that happens in conversations that you're a part of?
Okay, so I'll say now I'm kind of a group. Right now, I'm studying my MBA and we have diversity in terms of the cultural, like the nationality we have among us. Without being judgmental, we have, I'm trying to not to be passive as, okay, I know that Indians, they speak faster than us. Yeah, so I've been in many conversations like that I just have to and I'm the type that I don't go well with arguments. And when the argument is getting intense, I quickly want to back out. So I've been in conversations like that I just want to oh, I cannot comprehend what you are saying. I just want to retract. Maybe when I say, okay, I don't want to have this conversation, maybe you will pause and realize that, oh, maybe you realize what you are doing at that moment. But sometimes, yeah, it works that the conversation would stop. And sometimes maybe moving forward, maybe you would have learned a lesson from maybe this type of person doesn't want you to just continue to have a conversation without pausing, without even giving a chance to say, okay, let me hear what she has to say. or let me even understand the pace this person is going for better communication.
Yes. So Adijat, thank you for sharing all of that. And for everyone, as we think about communication, I saw some comments in the chat. I speak very fast. Sometimes I speak rapid fire. We want to think about how is our message landing, and can we integrate some pauses along the way to kind of show that a little bit more demonstratively on screen. The second piece of this is the thinking pause, which can command a higher level of authority, confidence, presence. So it might be, and Adijat, this would be something that you could even integrate into all that you just shared. It might be, well, I'm actually part of an MBA program right now. Pause. Inside of that MBA program, I have a lot of people from different backgrounds. Pause. They actually communicate in all different kinds of ways and at all different kinds of speeds. Pause. But what happens in the pause, Adijat? Like as I'm doing that and as you're receiving it, what is the power of the pause? Like what do people actually get to do as you're giving them space in the conversation?
What it does for me, it allows me to process what you are saying, and it allows me to integrate the understanding of what you are saying. Because one of the things for me when I'm communicating with someone is I want to understand and integrate what is either I'm taking a learning or I'm taking an instruction. So even if I'm taking an instruction, I want to be able to understand and deliver on whatever it is that I need to do. So the pause is allowing me to process it. If there's going to be any further question, it will allow me, okay, I have a further clarification on this because I have processed it and I'm trying to align it with my own understanding. So, but if you don't pause for me, it hinders me from processing it. It hinders me from further clarifying whatever it is that you are saying.
Yes. And what might happen? So all of that was perfect, Adijat. And for everybody out there, notice the difference in how the communication lands. I see a lot of the comments in the chat. It allows me to catch up. It allows me to think and digest. It allows me to respond. So inside of that, Adijat, if I pause and you have something that's urgent to share, what might be something you would be able to do as I'm pausing and not going too fast?
Sorry, I hope you don't mind if you repeat that again.
Yeah, absolutely. And I paused, so you were able to actually say, would you mind repeating that? And so that's something we want to think about. My question was, just to repeat it, Adijat, is inside of communication, rather than me saying 5 things in a row, if I say thing number 1 and then pause, and I can actually see you. Right now I can't see you, so I can't really pick up on some of the visual cues, but I would be able to see and think about, are you receiving my message? And so that's something for everybody else as we're thinking about this. When you see indications, if you're speaking rapid fire, you may not be seeing the indications on the other side in your audience that they may not be following along. So the other thing we can do along the way is I might pause and say, Adijat, does that make sense?
Yes. So if you pause and ask me, oh, does that make sense? Yeah, it's just for me to confirm if whatever it is that we are talking about aligns with me. It goes with my understanding. So, and then I can then move it forward to say, oh, this is my understanding, and this is how we are going to move forward.
Yes. And so maybe a simple yet obvious question is, do you think that would be useful to use in an interview?
Yes, it will be, because in an interview, from my experience, is there should be even breathing space from both the interviewer and the interviewee, because it allows you to even think of what should be said next. And when the interviewer also pause, like maybe after a question, it is they are pausing most likely for your response to come up.
That's right.
So this is very important because even as an interviewee, you need to then pause to get their own reaction as well, not as if you will be talking like you are speaking to radio. So
Yeah. And so here's just a tip for everyone as you're working on your communication, interview skills, or otherwise. I call it the check-in, but feel free to check in with your audience to make sure that they're still with you. It could simply be what I just did with Adajat, which is, Adajat, did that make sense to you? Now I'm going to get a yes or a no and find out, because if the person says, no, I wasn't quite clear on that, I could then say, would it be worthwhile for me to go over it again? Yes. Okay, great. So the three things I was talking about in terms of my skill set were that I'm a great leader, I'm a team player, and I'm detail oriented. And those are the three things I wanted to leave you with. So now, rather than step over it and the question's over, they ask you another question, you've actually made it conversational. And this is something we talked about Saturday when I was interacting with everyone, and I'll share, we're going to do another Saturday session this Saturday, but it's our ability not only to answer a question, but to maybe pause and ask them a question. It could be simply, did that answer your question? The other question you might ask is more open-ended. It might say, how could you see these skill sets really benefiting the role you're looking to fill? And now it's open-ended. They're not just going to say yes or no. They're actually going to answer the question inside of how you can provide value to the firm. So a little bit of a tangent here, but Adajat, a quick check-in before I move forward. Did that all make sense?
yes, it does.
All right, fantastic. So everyone, as you're doing this, think about, one, are you pausing? Because if you're answering a question, you talk about your three skills and it's rapid fire, it may be hard for the listener to actually keep up with all that you're saying and get all the value from it. Stu, I see you coming back on camera. What do you have to say inside of all of this?
Now, I think the pause is really powerful because it lets you get your point across and it lets the message land. This is a really important point, everyone. A really interesting question, David, which is why I actually came on camera. If you
Yes.
pause too much, wouldn't the person on the receiving end get bored?
It depends on whether you're boring or not. If your content is actually good content, they're not going to get bored. I think where people get bored is if you're too slow. So you want to kind of mix and match. And we're not talking about energy variance here, but the pausing doesn't have to be long pauses. You can see like this could be a long pause. That's actually a long pause. But as you've been listening to my language, pausing can be half a second. It can be 1 or 2 seconds. It can be a little bit longer to see. There's actually a technique inside of communication where if you pause a little bit longer, they may feel uncomfortable. And now you've actually got them a little bit on the edge of their seat. You're not doing it to make them uncomfortable. You're making them a little bit more engaged in the conversation. So there's a healthy balance here. I would say don't pause every sentence for 5 seconds, but it's a way to put a flag in the ground. We move on to the next topic. Flag in the ground, move on to the next topic. There's a rhythm to how you communicate. Does that answer that, Stu?
Does. Excellent. Thanks, David.
Could I make a contribution?
Yes, David, please come on in. David,
Yeah.
David, nice to meet you. I like folks with the same first name.
Yeah, it's nice to meet you too. This is first name as well. Just adding a little to what you said. I think I've come to understand that the interviewing process or conversations in general should be interactive. And like I said, adding to what you said, answering Stuart's question you raised. Do you reckon the person who takes too many pauses for the person who's or the audience wouldn't they get bored? I think if it's as interactive as possible, if you are engaged, if you're really engaging them, they won't get bored. The pauses would give them something to look forward to, waiting for what way it is next that you have to say. And then those pauses are windows of allowances for them to, as much as they're digesting what you're saying, it gives them the opportunity to ask questions and engage you on a deeper level. So I think, that's a two-way interactive process that conversations or the interview process is supposed to be. They are getting to know you and you're getting to know them. So that I think that's how it's supposed to be. So both parties engage in themselves, and then nobody gets bored, I think.
Yes, that is well said, even though I couldn't get every single word. It's a little choppy, but what David is saying is, how do we cause more engagement? The pausing can actually let them come into the conversation, and we can make it interactive by asking questions. So David, thank you for jumping in and sharing that. Much appreciated. All right, everyone, we've spent a little bit of time on this. I want to make sure we get to all the other content and pieces. So what I'll do is I'll go through some of it because I want to get to video best practice and take some more questions. But let's talk about language. What language should we use? What language should we not use? How do we think about language? So think about that right now. What are some of the elements that you would say I should do with language and I shouldn't do with language? I'm going to share the answers in a moment and just go through it. But in your mind, like, have you ever thought about language? Should I use jargon? Should I not use jargon? Are there words I should not be using? Let's talk about it. So one is, I call it the KISS concept, and you may have heard of it in the past, but keep your language simple. Like, you don't want to use hyper technical language unless the audience really knows the hyper technical language. You want to keep it so that whoever it is you're communicating with can understand it on the simplest level. If we get too technical and the person who we're with is not understanding of some of the technicalities, we're going to lose the audience. Again, jargon. So using phrases, and I'm not all that well adverse in some of the British phrasing, but I know there's different language that we use. If I started talking baseball and said I hit it out of the park, or I'm, next up at bat, like, some people might not understand that. If we're using phrases and references that other people don't understand, we're going to lose them in the conversation. Now they're going to be trying to figure out, what is he talking about? Touchdown. Like, if I say, yeah, and then I cross the finish line. If somebody doesn't understand what a finish line is, now I hope most people would, but it might be the case that they don't understand the references you're making. So be careful with the language you're using. Keep it as simple as possible and avoid some of the jargon that could have people say, I'm not sure what that means. OMG. I don't know if people are using that in interviews, but if I say OMG and somebody doesn't know what oh my God means, and it's also probably a little bit not necessarily that professional. So be careful with your word use. Third there, so remove filler words, the ums, the us, the likes, the you knows. So I might be saying, hey everyone, I think it's important to not use filler words and don't talk too fast. If I were doing ums and us all the way, what happens there? Let's go to Rolla. Rolla, what happens when we're using too much language, like filler words, that breaks up the communication? What do you start to do?
I think that it kind of detracts from the information that you're trying to provide. Well, I said it now, but I think it also kind of makes you seem a tiny bit confused at the same time. I mean, it's just so easy to say it as well, though, because it's so conversational and we always say it when we're talking. So to not say it, I think you have to be very conscious not to say
Yes. And what happens to you if somebody's using it a lot? Is it something that maybe you don't even think about, but is it something that could be distracting or annoying, or what would you say if somebody's using it every other word?
I think it just kind of gets boring at that point. You lose interest and you kind of want to move on to the next point that they're going to make or the next conversation.
Yes. So everyone, as you're rising in your mastery of communication and language, you might look back, maybe you record yourself. How prominent are some of these words in your language, and look to reduce them, because the reality is they don't forward communication and they make it less impactful. An or an can actually be a short pause. And a lot of times, sometimes we're trying to say so much and we're trying to figure out what we need to say. And so we just habitually fill in that space. We want to look to avoid that as much as possible. So as you become more aware of it, if you watch yourself or listen to yourself, then you start to see, Rolla, great, I'd say correction on the fly, because you noticed it, you heard it, and then you reduced it as you were communicating. So thank you, Rolla. With that, let's talk about body language. So body language does convey things. I'm going to share a few things just to think about. I do want to get to the video component of this so that we can go over video best practices. With that, use your hands or not use your hands. I think it's important to use your hands. We're going to talk about video best practice as long as your hands are in alignment with the message. As you see, I'm saying alignment with the message. They are coordinated. If I'm moving my hands while I'm speaking, they might be a distraction. Certainly if they were nervous and I was just fidgeting or clasping my hands the whole time, it's not in alignment with the communication, it distracts. So you want to be careful that your body language is forwarding communication versus distracting the audience. And it's a lot more important, certainly in person, because we can see all the different pieces of body language. In virtual, we only have this small box to work inside of. Posture, thinking about your posture. Where are you doing? You certainly don't want to be leaning back in the chair, and you don't want to be too forward into the camera. That just doesn't work. I think there's this neutral ground. We're going to talk about positioning in just a little bit, but posture, shoulders back, 90 degrees up and down. So we're facing straight forward. It's a confident and powerful posture to think about as you're communicating with someone. Smile, energy, we talked a little bit about that earlier. Let's go. Who else is out there? Andrea, do you want to jump in? What do you think about body language? Does this all make sense? Any comments that you might have around all of this?
Yeah, body language is really important. I find I kind of struggle with it sometimes. I don't really use my hands when I talk. I don't know if it's always necessary in a way, like it could be sometimes, but also sometimes I feel like if you've got eye contact, and of course you're like smiling, you're energetic and you're like approachable, you're open, then I think it can be enough.
Yeah, and so perfect. What we don't, well, let me ask you this question, Andrea. Would you rather watch a movie where things are moving around? Does that captivate more of your attention? Or would you just like to talk to a talking head who doesn't move and is stoic and
movement, obviously.
Yeah.
Movement. Yeah.
Yeah, and so there's a happy balance. So I'm not saying use your hands all the time, but it might be something to start to think about, because it expresses something. And you see me connect with you, almost like come through the screen. And the more we can practice and use some of these dynamics, the more impactful we can be. Any questions on that, Andrea, or does that all make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense, I think.
Fantastic. Stay with me again, because we're gonna go into eye contact here. I say a couple of things. Stu, I see you coming in. Any comments or thoughts that I can elaborate on? You are muted, Stu.
First time on Zoom. I think it is great, David. Can you just elaborate on the 90 degrees point about the posture and what you mean about that when you're presenting?
Yeah, like, so just think about, are you 90 degrees perpendicular with the screen, with where you're sitting? So 90-degree angle with how you are. You don't want to be leaning forward. You don't want to be leaning back. It's that upright 90-degree angle. Does that make sense?
Brilliant. Thank you, David.
Great. So eye contact, and Andrea, stick with me. I'll just ask you and see if you have any ideas on eye contact. But well, what are your questions, Andrea? How would you say eye contact is important? Would you say, are there different things that we could be doing with our eyes, or like what is the optimal way? Like anything that you might have a question about regarding eye contact?
Yeah, it's definitely important. It shows the person that you're paying attention to them if they're talking to you, and you can also see through their facial expression whether they're getting what you're saying or whether they're maybe not a bit confused or they're not hearing you correctly. Sometimes as you're talking, they might not be able to express what they're feeling, but you can tell from their facial expression. But I also do kind of struggle with that as well. It kind of makes me more nervous sometimes if I'm looking directly. So I tend to look like just to the side a bit or just above them. So I don't think you have to look in their eyes, but just make sure that you're like looking towards them. So there's a connection there.
Yes, absolutely. So eye contact is incredibly powerful. If we're avoiding eye contact, that may indicate that we're not so secure or not that confident in our ability to be in someone's presence. So we do want to give good eye contact. We don't want to be too like deer in headlights or laser focused or staring at people, because that gets really awkward really fast. But when I'm saying stick the landing here, and this is more in person, but it doesn't have to be. It might be I'm not making eye contact with you directly all the time. I might be thinking about and elaborating on something I'm talking about. And then I come back and I say, it's really important that you make eye contact. So I'm not keeping eye contact directly with you the entire time. I might give you a break, think about something I'm speaking about. But when I say stick the landing, your main points, you want to make them with the person, because sometimes we'll drown off and make it either to a piece of paper in front of us, or we won't make that critical point with their eye, because then I can connect directly with you as I'm making something important inside the conversation. Does that make sense, Andrea?
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for joining. Where are you joining from today, Andrea?
Colchester, in Essex.
Well, welcome to Colchester. So with that, everyone, let's talk. And I do want to leave some room for some Q&A as we go forward. What should you be thinking about remotely for interviews, for videos, and the best practices around it? So I'm going to go through some of that right now, and I'll take any questions you guys have, because I know sometimes it's recorded videos and sometimes it's live Zoom conversations. And so I'll leave a little room for some variation inside of that as we think about some of the best practices. So first off, let's look at core components. Angle. What is the angle of your camera? We're going to get into that in just a moment. I'm going to show you a picture. Lighting. How is the lighting that we're using? Are we able to see you and see you clearly without shadows? And then ultimately, what's your look on camera? How polished are you and how do you show up? Because this is critical. Sometimes they say you never get a second chance to make a first impression. And when they turn on the Zoom camera or you turn on the camera, there is a first impression. We want to make sure that we get that right and we think about all the critical components to that. So first off, let's think about this. I actually sometimes have my camera on a set of books so that I can look directly at the camera. That's one thing you want to think about. I don't worry too much about the angle, although that's something you can think about. It's more that the angle is directly at eye contact. It's eye level, so you can look right into the camera. And then additionally, you want to be spatially. If I was talking to you from all the way back here, I'm not taking up as much of the screen. It feels a little bit far away. Also, if I'm right here the whole time, you're probably going to feel a little bit weird and I'm too close. So you want to get the right happy space. And we're going to talk about positioning in the camera in just a minute. With that, here are some global leaders from current and past, and think about where they position themselves inside the camera as they are delivering keynote messages to the nation. With that little yellow bar, thinking about where we position ourselves in camera. I can't actually see myself because I've got a shared screen here, but here. So just think about, I always like to have a little space above my head, but not too much, so that we're taking up a good portion of the screen. And when we are using our hands and body language, it's actually in the screen. Because if I was doing hand motions down here, you would just see my body kind of going back and forth, but you're not actually seeing my hands. So make sure that's not impacting your video as well. Lighting, let's talk about lighting. So I'm flying through this stuff just so we can get through all the content. Then I'll take some live back and forth dialogue and questions, and feel free to put them in the chat as well. So before a light, after a light. We don't want to have it so we can't see your face. The better and clearer we can see your face, we can see all the intonations, the facial expressions, the smiles, the frowns, all the different things that are going on. It adds to the communication. But if it's dark and we can't see your face, it takes away from our connection with you. And we want connection. We want to make sure that we're giving our full expression of ourselves. So look at your lighting and take a look and see if there's something you might need to optimize. It could be simply putting a light behind your computer screen so that it adds more light onto your face. Sometimes a lamp can do that, or position yourself by a window so that you're getting some good natural light. And then beware of shadows, because sometimes shadows, you don't want it covering your face and impacting the communication. Angles, let's talk about angles and eye contact. We touched this briefly, but just look at the two. There is a difference. You want to be on the second, not the first version, because if think we're making eye contact, but I'm looking at myself on camera, in that case, I'm not making direct connection with you. Where is the camera? Know where it is and make good eye contact with it. Additionally, think about your background. This is kind of a little fun, but you don't want folks in the background, maybe a brother or a family member, or you don't want all your cats in the background. Certainly be cautious with some of the virtual backgrounds. Make sure that it's aligned. This is a virtual background that I have behind me. I'm actually using a fun green screen. There's technology on the Mac that allows me to do that. Behind me is a brick wall, but I've superimposed it. But because of the green screen technology, it's not choppy. So just be careful if you're using a virtual background that it's not choppy and breaking away from the actual conversation that you want to have, and it's not a distraction. Clearly, family and different things going on in the background will be a distraction. So just make sure that you're in a place that is welcoming, it's clean, and it also doesn't have a bunch of different things in the background that might take away from what you're actually saying. Summary, and then I'll take some questions as we're moving forward. Stu, if anybody else is there, I do see we have a few folks that are up on camera here, but just think about this. Work on your communication, work on the delivery of it. We covered a bunch of core elements, from eye contact to language, to body language, to the actual words that we're using and the pace at which we speak. Start to practice some of the pausing. Do you move too fast? Do you allow people time to think? All of this is stuff that we can practice in our spare time, along with all the different other components that we need to bring forth in an interview. Ensure your video setup is powerful. We just talked about a number of best practices, but do a quick analysis for yourself. Are you in the frame the right way? Are you able to use body language inside your camera? What are the different things that you need to be thinking about? And optimize and practice this stuff. Get feedback from people. This weekend, if you're going to join the Saturday session, I'll post the link to that, sign up in the chat in just a minute. We can go over and go into breakout rooms and get feedback from one another, but ask some of your people that you're communicating with, how's my setup? Is the lighting good? Am I in the frame the right way? How do I communicate? And then always practice. Take your smartphone. This is something that I did a lot of work with. Take your smartphone, put it up, hit record, and deliver a 2 or 3 or 5 minute message, and then play it back and do some self-analysis. That's something that can go a long way. If you do a few communications in rapid fire, turn back to back to back, record it and analyze yourself, do another one. Record it, analyze yourself, do another one. You're going to start to build the muscle inside your head to say, hey, this is what I like in my communication, and this is what I don't like. So then you start to eliminate the things that you don't like and enhance the things that you do like, and then you'll optimize your communication. So with that, Stu, who should we bring up? Any questions that are there? Or I can go to Liza or Charlene and whoever else is up on camera.
So before you go and do that, David, there's a great question in here that I just want to pick out. And it's as follows. How do you seek further clarity before answering a question without being seen as answering a question with a question? What do you do when somebody throws that curveball and you don't get it?
So Stu, could you just maybe clarify that for me a little bit? Like what was the question that was just asked?
Sure, certainly. So the question is, what happens when you aren't ready for a question, or you don't understand what the question is about? How do you break that down?
And do you mean that in the context of like the question itself, or like how would I interject inside of the question that's being asked?
Yeah, it's really around the content of a question. If you don't understand what somebody's actually asking you, so you can put your best foot forward in an interview.
Amazing. So I don't know if anybody was watching or witnessing that. And Stu, thank you for playing along, because I'm sure you picked it up along the way. But it's energetic. A lot of times it's energetic, but it's never a bad thing to say. Could you just restate that question for me, or clarify if you picked up on something that's not clear for you? Do you mean, in terms of my work experience, did you mean like what I did at the job itself, or something outside of that? So now you're doing it, but it's with genuine curiosity and it's with genuine concern, because nobody's going to say, no, I'm not going to tell you what that question is again. But you want to do it from a place of curiosity, not a place of I'm stalling because I don't know the answer. How does that land for you, Stu?
Yeah, it lands great. And I think you did a great role play on that and a great example. Another one before you pull in the people who are ready to come on screen. People who are shy and struggle to maintain eye contact. I want to look down. I don't want to look at you. How can people get over that? What can they do?
Amazing question. So this is something I struggled with. I think this is something that a lot of people struggle with as we're going through our growth and communication. Some of it is simply practice, like getting comfortable, just doing it, but do it with people that you're comfortable with, or find a partner inside of this community or otherwise, where you can just get used to actually making eye contact with somebody. Another way to do it, if you don't want to do that initially with someone else, do it in the mirror. Actually communicate with yourself in a mirror and make eye contact with the mirror, make eye contact with yourself. It's actually incredibly uncomfortable at first, but once you start doing it, it becomes a lot more natural. Now you're connected with yourself. I would also do it in this capacity, pull up a Zoom screen and make eye contact with the actual little circle that's on the screen, play it back, see how comfortable you can get with the camera itself. So those are some tips. One, use somebody else. use your mirror or use a camera, but the more you do it and the more you practice it, do it in friend conversations, notice and ask your friends, hey, how's my eye contact? Do I make direct eye contact with you? The more you actually bring awareness for yourself, whether you're doing it or not, and start to practice it in all your communication, it becomes a lot more natural and fluid.
Great. Thanks, David.
All right. I see Charlene and Liza there. How are you doing, Charlene? What's present for you in the conversation? Do you have any questions or things that I can respond to? Because I'm happy to take questions from anyone who has them at this point.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I just had one question, which was about the hands. Did you say the hands should be in your lap? No, let's say it's face to face. Should it be in my lap, or should it be yeah, or should it be like, can I talk with my hands? Because I think I kind of talk with my hands quite a bit. So I don't know.
I think talking and using your hands is important. And as I said earlier, as long as it's in alignment with what you're saying. If my hands are kind of all over the place and I'm overusing them and I'm just over volume of hands is not a good thing. But I also think hands in your lap below the table is not a great thing either. You can't really see it here, but what I would have is I'd have my hands out in front of me, not crossed. I'd have them open and on the table, just at the edges of my elbows so that they're there, I'm comfortable and I can use them as I need to. And then I put them back down as I'm done using them. So I use them to enhance, not to distract. And you want to be careful that you're not fidgeting with your hands, because some people clasp them, some people do things with their thumbs or play with a ring. You just want to be careful that your hand motions are actually intentionally to forward communication rather than nerves that you're exuding to the person who's communicating with you. Charlene, does that answer that question?
Yes, thank you.
Awesome. I see Liza. Liza, are you there? And what question do you have?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear.
Okay. My question is about pausing that you spoke about. So I talk very fast sometimes, and I used to think that when you pause in interviews, it connotes that you do not know what you want to say, or you're not really sure of the answer you want to give. So please, I want you to clarify that understanding. Maybe I need to, rewire my mindset about pausing in interviews.
So I'm going to clarify that question just to understand. So are you saying what's the appropriate amount of pausing, or can we pause too much, or what specifically?
Exactly. What I'm trying to say is that, is there a level of pausing that can show that you don't know what you want to say? That's what I'm trying to say.
Okay. Okay, perfect. So sometimes, I guess in interviews, we may feel like we're going to get stumped. And so what I usually recommend in terms of those moments, like if you're feeling yourself, I don't know what to say, I think a good approach is to ask to clarify the question. Could you say that just another way? I'm not sure if you're asking this, or I'm not sure if you're asking that. That's a great segue to give yourself some time. The other thing I would say is a way, if you are feeling like you don't know the answer to something, you don't want to try to make it up, because then that's going to come across, they're going to see right through it. So you might say, I'm not sure the answer to that, but what I can tell you is this. And so you're being forthcoming. Hey, I'm not actually sure the answer to that, but what I do know is, and then you can say something that's related to it that still adds value and demonstrates that you're not going to get flustered with the conversation, but you do want to be authentic and then share something that you do know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does.
And then,
thank you.
And so for the pausing, we don't want to pause too much. So when we notice that, just build that reflex for yourself. It's okay to ask a clarifying question. It's also okay not to know something, but don't say, I don't know, and let it fall flat. Say, I'm not sure the answer specifically to that. What I can tell you is this. So now you've built a little segue. Stu, I see you shaking your head there. Any thoughts on this one?
No, it's one I use every day in my life. I get questions from clients that I'm not quite sure what they mean. I ask a lot of clarifying questions because I want to make sure I can come back with something that's solid, robust, and honest. And when I don't know the answer, there's a ton of stuff I don't know the answer to. And when I don't, I'm really clear about this. Say, Liz, that's a great question. I don't know the answer to that, but as David said, here are the things I do know, and I'll come back to you on those specific points. And you make sure you follow up. And the other thing is you make sure you take notes. You make sure you write stuff down. I still keep my notebook here, which I'm making notes about this session of stuff that I want to do. Taking notes is incredibly important and incredibly powerful.
And what's great about what Stu just said, in an interview, it actually demonstrates, and I do this in client meetings sometimes for sales and other things, you're actually, something they said was important, and it demonstrates to them that something was important, or, oh, I actually want to remember that because I'm going to speak to it. And then you can use your notes as an opportunity to say, oh, John, as we were talking earlier, I took this note, and what I really wanted to ask you was this. So now in an interview, you're actually creating yourself a resource that you can then use. And how do we feel when somebody takes note of something that we said? It makes what we said that much more important. So you're actually demonstrating value towards the other person. What you said was interesting enough for me to write down. I wouldn't say take notes the whole time, right, Stu? We want to take notes the whole time.
No.
Put it in. Yeah.
Okay, thank
Awesome.
you.
Who else do we have here? I see Abuka. I think you've been here for a little while. And so is there anything present for you before we start to wrap things up?
Thank you very much so far for the insights and the speech so far. I really appreciate it. Well, not really, but I'm really happy with all the information you passed across to us, and it's really, really helpful. So what I want to just add is that, with what you said about pause is something I know is good, and it doesn't mean you really don't know what you're saying. You're trying to make sure you create an environment, you understand, in which the interviewer knows exactly where you're trying to pass across. You understand? Because I recently had an interview in which the interviewer was very, very impressed with me because I didn't speak so fast. I also taught her how to pause, you understand, so she can be able to get what I'm trying to let her know. She was impressed at the end of it because he said, I was expecting you to do this, do that. I was expecting you to say, I really like the way you pause while answering my questions. It was very, very good, and I like the way you responded. So keep it up. So that was why I felt happy and more confident, knowing that you have to pause, when answering questions, because it's really helpful. It doesn't mean you don't know what you're doing, but you're trying to make sure you explain in detail, especially like just need to do is just for you to explain in detail to that person asking you questions is very, very fun. Good. Thank you very much for that insight. I really like it.
Yeah, Abuka, thank you very much. And what's your native language? Are you English speaking, or what's your primary language?
English speaking.
Okay, because I'm just noticing it might, and this is live on the fly, pausing is important, and sometimes working on slowing down and enunciating as well, so that the language and the words are a little bit clearer. And I'm just giving you that feedback because that could be something that's powerful as you move forward. And everybody, a great exercise for you, if you feel like you might not be communicating as clearly as you want, is do this. Try to talk 10 times slower than you're used to. And when I give people that exercise and I do it live with people, we actually never go 10 times slower. We might go 1.5 times slower, but what you'll find is your communication is exponentially clearer as we slow down. And so that's maybe my parting words here, Stu. Any final questions or comments before we wrap up? I did put in, and I'll put it in again in the chat, everyone. If you want to join on Saturday, we had a great session this past Saturday where we're not just doing this in webinar form, we're actually going into different dynamics and breakout rooms where you get to connect with one another, but also practice some of this stuff and get some feedback. And I think that's invaluable for your own personal growth. But Stu, over to you. Stu, first time to Zoom.
I know. One more question, which I think is really important. It's around anxiety. What happens when I get really nervous and lose my way in an interview? How do I get myself back on track? What can I do?
Yeah, I'm still trying to master that one myself in the times when nerves. So a couple of things. One, always be present to your breathing. And so if you're in an interview and like you feel yourself, like you're feeling the nerves, focus on breathing a little bit deeper. Because what happens in interviews is our heart rate goes up, our breath rate goes up, and then anxiety is connected with all of our physical stuff. So before the interview, certainly make sure you're doing everything you possibly can to get relaxed. If you notice it in the interview, try to do deeper breaths, even as your mind is going on different levels and different speeds. Also, I think the notes thing that we just talked about, sometimes it's a way to ground yourself. Even just write down in your notebook, like as you're taking a note, I'm a little nervous right now, just for yourself. But when we can distract ourselves from the interview for a little bit and then come back, that goes a long way. Stu, anything that you would add? Because that's not an easy one. It's not an easy one when the emotions are high, when the nerves are high in the moment. The thing I would also say for everyone is it's practice. The more you do this stuff, the more you start to master your nerves, the less the nerves are going to show up. But Stu, anything else you might add?
So the first one for me is practice, 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 always practice. So when we're rehearsing a pitch for a client, we will rehearse it 5, 6 times and make sure that everybody knows what they're going to say and everybody knows the points they're going to land. I find when I get nervous in a meeting, I try to slow down. I take your advice and try to talk 10 times slower because it allows me to be clear, concise, to the point. But sometimes nerves get the best of me. They get the best of all of us.
I also see in there real quick, what if it's an audio interview and it's timed? What I'll say about communication in general, usually when we try to cram too much information into a conversation, it actually detracts from the message. Sometimes a simpler, shorter, more well-delivered message is a lot more impactful than a message that crams a lot of information in. So I would be less worried about providing too much information and more concerned with having your message be clear, concise, and to the point so that it delivers with impact. But yeah, I understand that concern because sometimes you want to put a lot of information in there, but make sure it's the right information. And that's what I would say to that.
David, thank you so much. And thank you everyone for joining us. If you need to catch these sessions, I put the link to our YouTube channel out there for you. Everything is published there as a resource for you. David's here for you. I'm here for you. The entire program is behind each and every one of you as you get ready for your internships. So good luck. We will see you again this week and have a great evening. And David, let's get up for David in the chat. David, I think it was an awesome session. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you, Stu. Everyone, always a pleasure. Feel free to reach out if you have questions or anything else. And we're, as Stu said, incredible resources and here to serve. So use us as you can.
Thank you so much, David. Have a great evening.
All right. Thanks, Stu.